No problem.
I am
I hope
recording,
you feel
so
better.
first thing I want to do is get verbal confirmation that you've been told that we're recording this and giving it to the library, and you're okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, great.
Am
So
I speaking to the camera, to you?
you're going to speak to
the-
me, so I'll scoot over a little bit. We're
Okay.
just going to try to ignore that.
We'll set up a time to do photos after this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a Langston Boulevard Alliance Legacy Business interview conducted by the Langston Boulevard Alliance and made possible by a historic preservation grant from Arlington County, Virginia. Today's date is June 11th, 2024. We are on site at Sun and Moon Yoga. My name is Bennett King, and I am a research assistant for Langston Boulevard Alliance. So I'll have you start with your name, and we'll talk about, you can go from there, like where are you from, a little bit about your background, and then you can even transition into how you got into yoga and how you started the career in this. Okay, I'll let you just run with it.
All right. So my name is Annie Moyer, and I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is completely irrelevant. My family moved up to the DC area when I was 5, and I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Okay.
Went to school up in Syracuse for a few years at the communications school. I finished my undergraduate degree at University of Maryland, came back home, moved into the city, lived in DC for a good 15, 17 years. And then when the kids were ready to go to school, we made that big, sad and scary and exciting leap across the river and raised them here in Arlington. And
Okay.
they're out of college now, so we're welcome to go back to DC. They've gone back to DC, but we're staying here because we love Arlington, and it's been a wonderful place to raise a family, to build community, to make friends, to roots are deep here.
Oh, that's
now.
great to hear.
Yeah.
What year did you move out here?
2001.
2001.
We moved here a month before 9/11.
Okay.
And that was a moment, you know, to be here so close and to have just moved here, and I remember walking around that day, and my children were not yet 2 years old, and feeling you know, that simultaneous sort of like we are so close to this danger event, and yet feeling so safe and so held by the people here. And I remember I had my kids, I took them to the playground, because what else was I going to do? I couldn't, I needed to get away from the TV. And there were only like 2 other, you know, it was a beautiful day, everybody who was here remembers, and there were barely any other families there, and I thought, oh, maybe we should have just gone straight home. So then went home, and my mother-in-law had called me like 5 times frantically. This was before it was common to carry a cell phone everywhere you went, and she's like, are you okay? Where are you? Where are you? I was like, I just went to the park. but that thing back to the feeling of community here. I immediately tuned into like, yes, this is a good place to be.
So let's talk about your you talked about your college education. What was the transition into your role here? Like, when did you start teaching yoga? How did that happen?
It was so incredibly accidental, honestly, and you'll hear that from a lot of yoga teachers. And some of the best ones never intended to be in that position, and yet there's a calling, and there's a sort of a current that draws us in. Which is what makes this practice and this tradition so magical. For me, it was, my career was as a high school English teacher. And then I had twins, and I realized that I was going to be so overwhelmed emotionally and physically. I couldn't do both. I couldn't put my all into the classroom and put my all into raising twins, and so I was fortunate enough to be able to stay home with them. And I had already been practicing yoga for a good handful of years, and when we moved to Arlington, I swore up and down to my yoga teacher, I'm going to be back every Wednesday night for our class, and she's like, okay, you know, and that didn't happen. Did not happen at all. And I was driving down what is now Langston Boulevard one day, and I saw the sign, Sun and Moon Yoga, and I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to find a new yoga home because it's logistically not going to work for me to keep going back to DC. And so I walked in here. We were around the corner at the time in a different spot in this same strip. I walked in and I thought, yeah, this is a good place. I'll start practicing here. It wasn't my first time thinking that I was going to be involved in yoga. That happened when I was about 4 years old, and my brothers and I were visiting my Grammy in Brookline, Massachusetts. And one morning, I guess I got out of bed early or something. I don't know how 4-year-olds figure that out or how I did, but I kind of like was wandering around the house by myself. I thought everybody else was sleeping, but Grammy was not sleeping. I found Grammy standing on her head, naked. So that was my first exposure to yoga.
True exposure.
True exposure. But so I said, Grammy, what are you doing? And she just gave me a one-word answer, yoga. And I believe that planted a seed. And forget the nudity. She was glorious. She was radiant. She was powerful.
Yeah.
She was standing on her head. And I think that from that moment on, I figured at some point I would do what Grammy did.
That's a great story.
And so then, fast forward, I'm living in Arlington. I found a new yoga studio, and I had been in touch with my original teacher, Bobby Ponce Barger. I have so much reverence for Bobby, and I said, I miss the feeling of like making yoga have like this bigger meaning in my life, and I think what I want to do is, and with the other thing I missed was teaching in the classroom, and I knew I wasn't up for going back to full-time teaching school, and I said, Bobby, I think what I want to do is develop a course where I teach the philosophy and history of yoga to high schoolers, where they can because if I knew then what I know now about what this can mean for a life and for emotional, personal growth, maybe I would have made some better choices as a 16, 17-year-old. And so she said, that's a great idea. I think you'd be amazing at that. But you probably need to get a teacher training certificate before you can legitimately present yourself as somebody who can teach all aspects of it. So I was like, fine. So here I am at Sun and Moon, and they have a teacher training program. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Yeah. That seems like the right next step. And everything just, it was a domino effect from there. So I did the teacher training, and then I started teaching yoga in the classroom, and in the studio room. One of my calls to yoga is not so much the physical, but the philosophical and the spiritual. And I had been reading the sacred texts since day one, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the Upanishads, and so it took a few years, but I did end up developing a course on the history and philosophy of yoga, and I actually was able to teach it as a sort of an adjunct at HB Woodlawn. Oh. And for 10 years I taught that course to dozens of high school kids right here in Arlington.
Did it include yoga as well, or was it just, so it was actually you were doing it and discussing?
We were practicing postures, we were reading the sacred text, we were discussing how it made meaning for our lives, and those students, a lot of them I made really deep bonds with. One of them came back after college, did our teacher training program, and is now a teacher. Another one went to seminary school and was really stimulated by the spiritual aspects of it.
You've got some great stories. Any other influences? You mentioned Grammy, and what was the gentleman's name from DC?
Bobby.
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry
no,
about that.
no.
You shouldn't expect that Bobby would be there.
Right.
So any other influences besides that got you into it?
Are there any? I'm probably forgetting some, but those are the main
Okay,
ones.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's talk about, we're going to make that transition now into the place. And first, I'd like you to describe, this is a great point for you to talk about the Arlington community as well, but I want you to describe the business that we're in. What's it known for? What do you do here basically? What's a typical day? All of that type of stuff.
So, there's the Sun and Moon Yoga business, and then there's the yoga industry. And I want to speak to the difference.
Okay.
Because it's one of the things that we really hold as a high important value. That what the yoga industry in America, and really in all of the developed West, has become is fairly superficial, very much tied to an image of a particular body, which is usually thin and which is usually white and which is usually privileged, and yoga is, if you tap into its origins, its roots, it's everything that is not that. And it's been a struggle for us as yoga has ballooned in popularity, and we have tried so very hard to stay true to the origins and the intentions of the practice. People come in here sometimes not really knowing much about who we are and what we're offering, and they're expecting, and I see them coming a mile away. They've got their sweat towels and their skimpy outfits, and I think, oh, I sometimes just want to send them straight to the gym, because they're not going to get here what they think they're going to get. They're going to get some amazing experiences, but it's not going to be a hot, fast workout.
Yeah.
And so what we prize is the therapeutic value of a yoga practice for everything about what keeps a person thriving in this very difficult world. What we prize is the spiritual nature of it, and without proselytizing or without sort of naming any particular religious orientation, because there is that thread of yoga. What we're doing is sort of offering the practice as a catalyst to connecting to something that's more than just your body, more than just your small and personal concerns.
Okay, so what does that look like in the classes you offer or the services you offer? How does that translate into that?
Well, it looks like a lot of careful attention, a lot of slowing down, a lot of breathing, a lot of connecting to the body in a deep and internal way, as opposed to put your arm here, put your leg here, grab your toes. And plenty of people can do things that are cute and fun and party trickster-like with their bodies, but that's never the priority. The priority is, how does it feel inside? The priority is, what does this awaken in you as an awareness of how can you train up a compassionate and equanimous presence in the world? Who cares if you can touch your toes or put your leg behind your head or do any of those physical tricks? It's, what kind of person are you when you walk out this door?
This is the first time I've heard this. This is not the type I usually hear. Very good. Right. Okay, so services that you offer I think I heard online. You have online classes. You have in-person classes. Do you still do the training? Like, why don't you just give me an example of the things that you do here?
So we have our regular weekly classes. That's sort of the cornerstone of what we do. That's the bread and butter, and that's where the bulk of the community is coming together and making connections and feeling like they're part of a yoga family.
Yeah.
We the other big piece of our programming is weekend workshops, where teachers who have a specialty in some area offer an in-depth look. My partner Amir Tahami is a yoga therapist who is really well known for helping people heal in their bodies mechanically, and then everything else that can lead to when you're no longer feeling yourself in pain. Then you can have an opportunity to pause and wake up to.
Your momentum's building.
And wake up to your position in the world. So his yoga therapy for back pain, for neck pain, for your hamstrings, for your hips, for your psoas, for your neck and shoulders. We're very well known for that.
Okay.
We're also a big part of what we've done over the many years is to bring in guest teachers from all over the country who are well known across the board for yoga. And so we have lots of really deep relationships and connections with influential teachers from all over.
And then do they come in, you said they come in for especially workshops?
Yeah, so they'll come in and teach like a long weekend, a
Okay.
Friday night to all day Saturday, all day Sunday.
So let's talk about the clients. Who are your clients? Maybe are they all local, or they come from elsewhere? Just give me an idea of who they are and by the way, you mentioned, sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned that the Sun of the Moon community, and so if you can expand on that too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So most of our students live within a few miles of the studio, and we have a second location in Fairfax as well. We opened that location in 2001, and after this location had been open since 1994. We're about to celebrate our 30th anniversary.
Wow.
And that's very exciting. And Fairfax has been a big part of that all along. We did have to close our original Fairfax location as a pandemic casualty, but we reopened in a newer spot in Fairfax City just under a year ago. And yeah, it's a neighborhood. It's really like a mom and pop neighborhood thing. Although we do have people who come from Falls Church and Alexandria and Springfield and DC, and you've got some Bethesdans sprinkled in. Yeah. So but by and large, it's people who live close by.
That's so you consider this a mom and pop shop then?
I do.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm the mom, I guess. And Amir is the pop.
Okay, so let's go on to that history. So we talked a little bit about that. You said this. Do you remember when it originally started before you owned it? And just walk through your transition and all of that. Yeah.
Sure. So in the fall of 1994, J.J. Gormley opened the physical space in this building around the corner.
Okay.
It was in what is now Company Flowers, which is also a legacy business.
Yeah.
And
there's several right in this block. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then moved next door to what is now the fishing store in this same strip, and then in 2002 we moved into this space, which used to be Errol's Video, and before that it was the drug fair, and it's one of the sites that was integrated by the students demonstrating in the 60s for an end to segregation. And so I feel like this is hallowed ground, because literally, like right here under this very same roof, there were students who refused to move from the counter until they were served, and that means a lot. That means a lot to me, because part of what yoga is a social conscience.
Yeah.
And to respond to the pain and the suffering of not just ourselves, but to everyone, because we share this universe we breathe the same air, and so we feel the same pain. So anyway, my partner Amir Tahami bought the studio from JJ in 2005.
Okay.
And I began to be involved in, he wasn't my partner at the time in any of the ways, but I began to be more and more involved. I was going through divorce. I needed to work more. I had some skills that I felt I could offer. And so we started to build our partnership in terms of running the business from there, and then a personal partnership from there as well. And so we've been running this together since about 2009,
okay.
10.
So he had it in 2005?
Five.
And then were you in...
I was teaching.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask.
Yeah, I started teaching here in 2002.
Okay, great. Anybody else involved in it?
Dozens and dozens of people, like terrific, wonderful people. We have a staff of about 5. And then we have a volunteer staff who trade 2 hours at the front desk for their classes. And it's people who've been with us forever and ever and ever. And it's a family that continues to grow and expand and shift and evolve.
So
yeah.
You mentioned that. So you must have multi-generational clients now. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
That is an amazing thing to see. People come in, we've had people who met here and got married. We've had people who came here pregnant and those children are now teaching.
Wow.
We have people who came with their teenage kids, and now those people are bringing their babies to family yoga.
Yeah.
We've suffered some really heartbreaking losses as well. A couple of sudden deaths of our teachers, and those are always moments where we're reminded what it means to be in community like this.
Can you talk a little bit? Did you meet Amir here, or was there? Okay, so that you met through teaching.
Yeah.
Okay. The original owner, what did they go on to do?
JJ went on to do her own independent yoga therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's known for as well.
Okay.
Yep, she moved out of the area.
Okay, moved out of the area, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So where did the name come from?
I don't know exactly where JJ named it, but I don't know what her inspiration was, other than if you read the sacred texts, metaphors of sun and moon are everywhere, sprinkled throughout it.
Yeah.
One area where you'll see a lot of reference to sun and moon is when the inner energy lines are described in some of the original texts. What I call them, the original yogis intuited that there were currents of what they were experiencing as energy running through the body, and that there's a central channel called the Sushumna, but then there are 2 primary channels that run adjacent up and down to the Sushumna, and they are the Ida and the Pingala, also known as the sun and the moon. So it's the idea that that you don't have darkness without light, and vice versa. You don't have day without night. You don't have a male aspect without a female aspect, and that they're continually intermingling and crossing and feeding and supporting each other. And the idea of yoga as union is that once we can create a connection between those opposing forces, then we can find our path to liberation.
I think you did know where the name come from. That sounded pretty good to me. That was pretty convincing. Okay, so let's talk about, you had mentioned some of the changes. I'm talking too loud, sorry, forget I'm in yoga.
No, you're fine, you're fine.
You mentioned when you guys took it over, then the Fairfax office. Any other changes that have happened in the... Or let's actually, while you're at it, why don't we talk about, you mentioned in Fairfax you had to close down. Mm-hmm. So even let's talk about COVID. Like what was it like running through that?
That's the big change.
Okay.
I mean that is when everything that we had been preaching all these years about, like, non-attachment and impermanence, and you can get through anything if you just breathe, and then all of a sudden, bam, did you mean it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I might cry.
That was a tough time, yeah. I don't blame you.
Yes, you can breathe your way through anything. So, I remember about 2 weeks into February of 2020, and one of our teachers, Roger Panetta, our dear friend, called us and said, you know, guys, you really should start thinking about putting some online content out there, because we might have to shut down for a little while. And I was like, oh, Roger, you're always an alarmist. It'll be fine if we have to shut down for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Then there's so much good yoga online. People will figure it out, and then when we made the decision to close, I put a sign on the door that said, "Check back in 2 weeks." And then when we came back in here 4 months later, it looked like we had run for our lives. Like nothing had been touched. You know? It was hilarious. There was like a coffee mug on the desk and a sad plant. And so, but those early days were a flurry of activity, a very steep learning curve, and an amazing outpouring of support. And everybody who had any sort of skill or understanding of how to use technology to create an online platform jumped up and said, "Let me help."
Yeah.
And we had a YouTube channel up within a couple of days. And in the early days, what we did, actually for a long time, what we did was we offered a free 30-minute class on YouTube, live streamed every morning at 10 a.m. And we had alternating teachers come through, and I did the first one. Oh God, it was so bad. I tried to do it on my rooftop, because we hadn't figured out our lighting and our spaces in our homes, and I did it on my rooftop, and an ambulance went by, and the sound was bad, and the light was wrong, and I didn't know how. It was just, so things like that happened. And then we had our Zoom schedule up and running within 2 weeks, and it's still up and running. So that was the biggest thing, and I just didn't think at that point that anybody would be interested in doing that.
Yeah.
And they're still doing it.
Yeah, boy, has that changed, huh?
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about the life we live on Zoom now, completely converted from, those couple of years.
And I'm so incredibly grateful for it. What would we have done if this pandemic had hit 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago? 10, We did not have the technology.
We'd have to be using Teams. That was a terrible
Skype.
experience.
I guess we had Skype.
We did have Skype. That's
but right.
So we got through the sad part. Let's talk about some of your. Let's talk about successes. So let's. You had the struggles. What are the successes you would mark?
The pandemic was a success.
The end result.
Yes, it was, because it just showed us. It showed us that what we had been saying was true, was real. We weren't lying when we said that yoga can be a vehicle to support us in the most difficult times. And it was a success because it opened the possibility and the accessibility of the practice to so many people.
Yeah.
And we do have lots of people who have since then moved out of the area who are still taking classes because they can on Zoom. I think another success has been the way we have held fast to our values and our convictions about what yoga is. We also have been flexible and adaptable and opened up to the possibilities that yoga could actually be even more than what we said it was. Recently we merged with a practice who came from a studio that closed in Clarendon, who brought some heated classes here and some more vigorous Ashtanga practices, and that's been great. Yeah.
So you have brought in there's been some change in the types of classes. Okay.
Yes.
What else has changed? Like starting from, are you the same type of practice as the original owner, or do you see changes? It's the same.
Yeah. One of her legacies was that we can be an eclectic place of practice, and I really, really value that for lots of reasons, but for one very big reason, and that is that we have seen over and over, not just in the yoga community, but in every industry, that guru worship doesn't go well. And that when you hinge what you're doing on one person, on a cult of personality, and you put somebody up on a pedestal that you built high and that you invested your whole soul and belief in, it's gonna come down.
Yeah.
And the scandals, the abuses of power, the stories of sexual assault are rampant in our industry, and we have escaped that, wholly escaped it, because it was never about a person. Yeah. It was always about it was never about the person teaching. It was always about the person receiving and practicing, and the teaching is a two-way street. And so that eclecticism, that eclectic nature of how we approach yoga has served us well, because we didn't have to change our name.
Yeah. Like
some other studio personalities who shall not be named have had to change their names.
Because they're about the single person.
The person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good transition into what are your personal lessons learned through running this business?
Non-attachment, for sure. And I remember a conversation that I had with another studio owner in DC early in the pandemic. And she said, nobody ever promised me that I would own a yoga studio forever and ever, and this might be it. This might be the end. I might just be going to do something else. And that was just a great, great reminder that impermanence is real. Yeah. And it's happening every moment. We just don't recognize it until it slams us in the face. So that's one thing, and we've seen really wonderful teachers come and go. People's lives change. I am not currently teaching. I used to be an English teacher. I did say that before. I'm not teaching classes right now. I haven't been actually for a couple of years. I'm actually in a Master of Divinity program to become a Buddhist chaplain, and so the value of embracing a willingness to change, I think, can serve us well.
How about with the community? What lessons have you learned in your larger family? I think
one lesson that I could speak to is about showing up for what the community needs in the moment, and not being separate from it. I mean, it's impossible to be separate from it, although there are businesses who try their best to say, like, we just do what we do and we keep our head down and we don't get involved in things like, dare I say, politics. And I'll share a really good example of that. In 2015, our well-meaning but slightly misguided landlord, can I say that on camera?
You don't have to say the name.
Leased a space in our strip to a gun seller. And the community was outraged.
Yeah.
because it does not fit with the values of the majority of the people who live here. And the statistics about gun violence are overwhelming. It's a scourge. It's a public health issue, and regardless of your feelings about the Second Amendment, to have that presence in a community that understands the dangers was a real threat. It was a real threat to all of us.
Yeah.
And they were threatening boycotts of all of the businesses in the Strip.
Mm.
And we couldn't disagree with that because we didn't disagree with that. And so we actually became involved and teamed up with several of the community association leaders, with our elected officials, with the other business owners in the community. We invited a conversation and a dialogue with the owners of the gun store themselves who had leased the space. And we had a big session here. There were about 30 people representing all different areas, and we had a really, what we thought was a really meaningful conversation, and also reached an understanding that this wasn't really the best place for them. Well, they also had attorneys who were provided by the NRA, and things turned ugly immediately after that. And we started seeing nasty Yelp reviews, which we had never seen before.
Yeah.
We started getting all kinds of horrible phone calls, which had never happened before. But we stood firm, and we were able, with the help of a few other really committed neighborhood leaders, to convince the landlord to pull out of the lease.
Yeah.
And he had to buy them out, and he did the right thing, and he knew that he had to do it, and the community was just endlessly grateful to us for taking a leadership position in that moment.
Yeah, how could you not with it that close too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we're talking about community, you've been here long enough that we get to talk about a lot of this. So we're going to start with how has, even before you owned the place, how has Arlington changed? How have you seen it change?
Oh, well, I mean, I invoked the mom and pop business notion, and sadly a lot of the moms and the pops have not made it.
Yeah.
The pottery barnization of Arlington has been pretty spectacular. And I shop at Pottery Barn, so I can't entirely complain, but I know that it has made an impact, and I know that I miss the independent small businesses who always used to be here, and that's sad to me. Yeah. The small sweet restaurants and bookstores and boutiques that we loved patronizing that have not stuck around. The fact that this building right across the street from us has not been able to keep a tenant in all these years. Yeah. And so that's sad and frustrating. On the flip side, I love a big, bustling, vibrant community, and I recognize that you need thriving businesses, that it's a mutually supportive environment. And I wish that rents were more affordable. I wish that landlords had more incentive to lease space to smaller businesses. I wish there were ways that our local government could get more involved in making sure that small businesses and neighborhoods could thrive. I think the Langston Boulevard Alliance has done an incredible job of holding up that mantle. But it takes more than that. Yeah. So, what other changes?
How about the people? Like, have you seen changes in the people who live here, or clientele, or?
It feels very youthful to me, and that's exciting.
Was it before, do you think, or has that changed?
It might be that I've gotten older, so everyone else seems younger. I don't know. I'm not sure. Now I'm taking it back. Is it more youthful?
Did you see you mentioned like you can see the customers coming, you're like, maybe we're not the right place for you. Is this a new thing? Has that come with the Pottery Barnization? Like, or has that always been the case?
I think it's always been
the case. Okay.
Yeah.
So not too much of a change.
I don't think so, actually.
Okay. Oh, we already talked about that. We already talked about that one. Okay, so let's talk about what is the importance of legacy businesses like yourself to communities like Langston, the corridor here?
Well, the continuity of a place is something that I think lends some roots of meaning to it. Like, I don't know where you grow up, but sometimes I'll have occasion to drive with the family out to near where I grew up, and I can say, oh, that used to be the place where, and that used to be the thing where, and so what used to be our main drag was 2 lanes, one in each direction, is now 4 lanes, 5, 6 lanes, and it's overwhelming. And again, I live my life teaching impermanence, but to have a sense of place, I do think involves a sense of some thread of continuity, and I think that's what's most important about legacy businesses. Company Flowers is a great example. Our neighbors and friends around the corner of people who bought their prom corsages there, and now their kids are doing the same, that kind of thing. It means something.
Yeah, it's no joke. Legacy businesses are there's a book written on that about Sense of Place that's around legacy businesses and how they are they hold the community. That's one of the reasons I think we're doing this too, is to inspire that with the county, inspire them to understand that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or changes that came around from renaming to Langston Boulevard? Any thoughts on the process or?
Thoughts on the process. Well, it was interesting. I mean, I was on the renaming committee. I participated in the whole process. I thought it was. I loved how it unfolded.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we could have used the name Loving. The family was not on board with that, and we had to honor that.
Yeah.
But it's sort of when I told my kids once they decided where they were going to college, they weren't going to spend another minute saying, well, if I'd only gone to that other school, so I don't spend any time saying, oh, if we had renamed it something different than Langston. I love saying Langston Boulevard. I love what it means. I love what it honors. No, I think the process was great. I'm proud. So proud of it.
Yeah, it was amazing. I got to write that report too. That was pretty amazing. Having not understood what the process was and come in and do all the interviews, it was pretty an amazing process.
Great.
Did you have any questions? Either one of you? Okay, well, I think that's it.
Okay.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Any other tidbits of knowledge you'd like to share?
Oh, just remember to breathe.
That's a good one. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead and wrap it up, and thank you very much.
Yeah.